The fire crackled softly in the cold darkness of the forest, and though the flames cast long glowing shapes against the surrounding tree trunks, something about the air that night felt strange to Aisha, as if the woods themselves were holding their breath. She had always loved camping, especially the kind far from cities where the noise of life disappeared and the night sky became a dome of glittering stars, but this trip was different. She and her two friends, Mina and Layla, had chosen a remote forest known for its quiet beauty, but the locals had warned them with uneasy smiles not to venture too deep, not to stay out too late, and to never ignore the feeling of being watched after dark. The warnings felt like superstition, the kind old people used to keep strangers safe, or maybe to scare them off the land. But as the girls sat around the fire, eating noodles from metal bowls and laughing at old memories, Aisha noticed something she couldn't shake. Every time she looked up from the flames, she felt as though eyes were following her, just beyond the orange glow. At first she thought it was just the forest animals, raccoons, maybe a fox, nothing unusual, but the feeling didn't drift away as the night grew colder. Instead, it tightened around her like hands on her shoulders. Mina was the first to sense it, pausing mid-sentence, staring in the direction of the dark trees as if she had heard something move. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Layla shook her head, but her face had drained a little. Aisha listened, holding her breath, waiting. Then there it was, the faintest rustling sound, not like a small animal, but like something big stepping carefully through leaves. They all turned toward the dark in unison. Nothing moved. The fire hissed and popped. The cold air pressed against their cheeks. Then, slowly, Mina reached out and added another log to the fire, wanting the light to stretch farther into the darkness. "Probably just deer," Layla said, forcing a smile, but Aisha could tell she didn't believe it. When the wind shifted, carrying the smell of pine mixed with something else, something faintly metallic, Aisha felt goosebumps rise along her arms. The girls tried to shake off the unease and continue talking, but every few seconds one of them would glance at the trees again. The night no longer felt peaceful. It felt like they were trespassers in someone else's territory. As the fire dimmed, Aisha got up to collect more wood, grabbing the flashlight from her backpack. "Don't go far," Mina warned, her voice shaking slightly. Aisha nodded and walked a few feet away, the beam of light cutting through the dark like a blade. The woods seemed silent now, too silent, as if even the insects were holding still. She bent to pick up a dry branch when she heard it breathing. Not hers. Not human. Slow, heavy, wet breathing coming from the darkness behind her. Her heart slammed in her chest. She didn't dare turn around. She forced herself to straighten slowly, her hands trembling, and lifted the flashlight. The beam flicked across the trees, the brush, the empty air, and then it landed on something that made her freeze. Two eyes. Yellow, reflective, too high off the ground to belong to any normal animal. They didn't blink. They didn't move. They just watched her, unbroken, as if studying her. Aisha's breath caught in her throat, and she stumbled backward, dropping the branch. "Girls," she whispered, but her voice wouldn't rise. When she blinked, the eyes were suddenly gone. She sprinted back toward the campfire, nearly tripping, her face pale. "There was something watching me," she gasped. Layla grabbed her arm. "What did you see?" "Eyes," Aisha whispered. Tall, yellow, they weren't animal eyes. The forest seemed to close in around them then, shadows pressing against the edges of the camp like hungry shapes waiting for the fire to die. They tried to calm themselves, but no amount of reasoning erased the terror that now hung over them. Mina suggested packing up and driving back to the nearest town, but the problem was their car was parked a quarter-mile down the trail because the ground near the campsite was too uneven to drive on. "We'll go together," Layla said firmly. They grabbed their bags quickly, shoving things inside with shaking hands, and doused the fire with water, plunging the campsite into darkness. Only their flashlights remained, thin beams slicing the night. The woods seemed louder now. The crunch of leaves, the shifting of branches overhead, the scraping of something against bark. They moved together, close, their breaths uneven. Halfway down the trail, Mina stopped. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. They stood still, their hearts pounding. At first there was nothing, then the sound came again, soft but deliberate. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Matching their pace. Aisha swung her flashlight behind them. The beam landed on the trail. Empty. But the footsteps continued. Layla grabbed Mina's hand and whispered, "Run." They bolted down the trail, their bags slamming against their backs, the night swallowing their screams. Something was chasing them. They could hear it now, leaves exploding under massive weight, branches snapping, breathing growing louder and louder behind them. Aisha didn't dare look back. She felt hot breath brush the back of her neck and pushed her legs harder. When the parking area came into view, all three sprinted toward the car, fumbling with the keys. Mina yanked the door open, and they threw themselves inside, slamming the doors. The forest fell silent again. Aisha's hands shook uncontrollably as she turned the key. Click, click, nothing. The car wouldn't start. "Please, please," she whispered, trying again. The engine coughed weakly. Then a shadow passed across the windshield. All three girls screamed. Something massive stood in front of the car, just outside the flashlight's reach. A shape hunched tall, wrong. The girls froze as the creature stepped closer. Through the glass, Aisha could finally see it. Long, reaching limbs, matted for clinging to its uneven frame, a face stretched too wide with sharp, glistening teeth. And those same yellow eyes, burning with hunger. It leaned down, sniffing the hood of the car, its breath fogging the glass. Mina covered her mouth to keep from screaming. Layla whimpered softly. Aisha gripped the steering wheel so hard her knuckles went white. Then the creature's head snapped up, its gaze locking directly with Aisha's eyes. Time stopped. It began to step toward the driver's side. Suddenly headlights. Bright beams flooded the clearing from behind them. A second car pulled in fast, gravel flying. A loud horn blared. The creature jerked its head toward the lights, snarled with a sound that rattled Aisha's bones, then darted into the woods with impossible speed, vanishing like smoke. Aisha finally managed to breathe again. The car behind them belonged to a local ranger, an older man with a stern face who hurried to their vehicle. "Are you girls insane?" he snapped. "You shouldn't be out here after dark." They stumbled out of the car, crying, shaking, trying to explain between sobs what they had seen. The ranger's expression changed, not to disbelief, but to recognition. "You weren't supposed to camp this deep," he said quietly. "People go missing out here. We try to warn everyone." "What was that thing?" Mina whispered. The ranger didn't answer immediately. He looked toward the dark forest, jaw tight. "Some things in these woods don't want to be seen," he said. "And if they know you've seen them, they don't forget." He insisted on escorting them into town, and they didn't argue. The ride was silent, except for their shaky breaths. When they reached safety, the ranger gave them one last warning. "Don't go back there. Ever. And if you feel something watching you in the dark, trust that you're not imagining it." For weeks after the incident, Aisha couldn't sleep without keeping a light on. Every creak outside her window made her heart race. She stopped camping altogether, even though it had once been her favorite hobby. But the worst part wasn't the nightmares or the fear. It was the feeling she still couldn't shake, that something was still watching her. Sometimes at night, just before she fell asleep, she swore she saw faint yellow reflections just outside her window, unmoving, unblinking, waiting. She kept trying to tell herself it was trauma, imagination, leftover fear. But deep inside, she knew the truth. Whatever had stared at her from beyond the campfire that night had followed her home.